Hi everybody, here's Christian from Team Markcast, and this is our Pico-8 tutorial. We are going to create Breakout or Arkanoid on a Pico-8. I hope you saved last time around because, man, it would have been awkward if this wasn't saved. Right. There's some cleanup to do. We aren't actually changing the color anymore, and we actually ended up not using the frame. We might be bringing these things back, but for now I'm just going to delete it because there is not a lot of screen real estate here on the Pico-8. If you want to scroll fast through a long program, not something that's necessary now, but later on it will be, you can press Alt and press the arrow keys, and you can skip to different functions. Your program is going to be all just functions. So skipping to the next function is very useful. More like high-end development environments, like a real Visual Studio or something, have like a list of all the functions and stuff like that. We don't have the comfort here. Maybe like in the next series, when we're gonna do more bigger games, not just Breakout, I'm gonna show you how to develop in Pico-8 on like a real development environment, not just within Pico-8. But I kind of like the simplicity of Pico-8. It's something that's really appealing to me as somebody who's been developing in different environments. Anyways, today I want to talk about input. So yeah, we want to have a pedal in here, and we want to control this pedal, right? Because this is how Breakout works, this is how Pong works, right? We want to have a pedal that you move back and forth. Let us first start because I could start like putting in if statements for the key presses, but I need something that actually reacts to them first. So let us just draw a pedal first, right? Let us draw a pedal. And to draw a pedal, we can already start like thinking about the coordinates that we're gonna use for this. So we're gonna go pad x, that's the x coordinate for the pedal, like 30. Pad y, that's like 120. Pad underscore w, that's gonna be the width of the pedal, because maybe we're gonna have like power-ups that change the width of the pedal. Sometimes you have this in Arkanoid type of games. So yeah, let's do this. And we don't really need the height, but since we already are so far, let's go also with a height for the pedal. Let's put it at 4. I'm just spitballing. I actually just launched my pocket chip commercial right now, because I actually already coded this on the pocket chip. It was great. Here you can see how, see it starts in Pico-8 here. That's so great. It's so fun to work on this on the run, on the go. So yeah, so I recoded this, and I will actually derive because I did some experimentation with this, and I found the perfect numbers for a pedal in Pong. And so let me see. This is really great YouTube stuff. So I know exactly the numbers, but first, before I type in the perfect numbers that I derived in a very scientific fashion by trying and failing all the time, we're gonna just draw the pedal first. So you can see we already filling the entire screen with blue. We can use the same function, the same command, to create a tiny little rectangle at the bottom, which is going to be our pedal, right? So we have rect fill, and we're just going to take all these variables that we created up here. I'm just going to plug it into the rect fill. And so this little rectangle will be completely controlled by variables. And so we can then fiddle around the variables and change the size and shape of this beautiful rectangle. So the first two coordinates are the top left coordinates of the rectangle. The next one are the coordinates of the bottom right corner. So we're gonna go pad x plus pad let's call it width, right? And the same with the height. So pad y plus pad height. And as for the color, again, using our trusted cheat sheet, either the 6 or the 7. What did I use in my Pico-8 version? I mean, I'm totally like cheating here. Draw. Where's draw? There we go. Did I use the complete white or did I use a light gray? That's the two choices we have. I like the white pad. I'm the kind of guy. 7. So 7 was, I think, the complete white. Yep, that's 7. Let's go with 7. So this is one of the situations where we have a bug. There's a bug in our program. Go! So it seems to be the problem is attempting arithmetic on a global frame and nil value. The problem is that do you remember how we deleted a couple of variables at the beginning of this game? Now the variable doesn't exist, but we are starting to do arithmetics with this, and every variable starts with nil inside, and you cannot do math with nil. Nil is like empty. So it creates a variable called frame. The frame is just nothing in there, not even a number, but we want to suddenly add math to it, and it's like, what? And we're like, all right, just don't do it. We misspoke. You know what? This is actually a really good pedal now. I actually accidentally created a really nice looking pedal, I think. Let me see what the numbers are that I had in my version. I'm actually good at this. I'm good at this, guys. Right, ball. That's ball. So I actually made an even bigger pedal. It's 52 in width. Oh, that's actually the position. It's the starting position. This is a good starting position. Width, it was actually smaller, 24. And actually a very thin pedal, half the size. So these are the numbers that I thought were good numbers for a pad. And it's like, if you're like, that sucks, man. I want my pedal to be different. Just go ahead and put different numbers in here. I'm not saying these are the best numbers ever. You will be fine. You can just put other ones in here. Oops, it's not where I wanted. Run. There we go. This is our pedal here now. And I kind of, you know what? You might be 3. My 3 might be a better number. Yeah, it kind of feels, it has to have the right size compared to the ball, I feel. I don't know why I went with 2. Past me was a silly person. I have learned. Okay, so now is the point where it's like, okay, we cannot actually control this. This is stupid. This is not a game. It's not even a walking simulator because there's no walking. We can just watch a ball going to the walls. Ball to the wall. Right. So here in the update function, we're going to start actually the update function by seeing like, hey, did the user actually press any button? Because if they did, maybe we want to change something, right? So as you can expect, there's an if then. And again, using the cheat sheet, there is things you can check to see which button you press. So it's called btn and then parentheses, and then you put a number, and the number corresponds to the button that we had to press. So again, cheat sheet. I'm going to show you up here, and you can. This is from the internet. Like this is, you can get this on the internet if you look at this up. There's different numbers associated with each button. There is like a 4-way control thing, D-pad, and then 2 buttons. And button 0 is for left, and button 1 is for right. Yes, Starhogen helping me out. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate. So if button 0 and button 1. And you might be wondering this, but wait a minute, why button 0? It shouldn't be like something like a statement like if button 0 equals true or 1. Well, button 0 and button 1 can be only true or false. It would be indeed something like equals true. It has to be double equal. Don't ask me why. I'll explain it later. But if you have something like this, because it can be only true or false anyway, you can just leave it out. And it's like if button 0, if that's true, then something happens. And if button 1, if that's true, something happens. If it's false, then nothing happens. It's kind of a nice thing if you are saving false and true, the statement for like the Boolean variables, false and true. If you're saving these in variables, then you can just plug them directly into an if statement. And that's why they're very useful. That's why you're using false and true inside variables. All right, so button 0 is left. And button 1 is right. So what happens when you press left and right? Well, super easy, man. We're just gonna go pad x equals pad x minus 1. And I want you to remind me that we're gonna simplify this in a second because I can't writing this. This is easier to understand, but there's an even shorter way to write this. And then we're going to write, then we're going to actually add to the x value. So every frame the left button is pressed, we are going to move the pad to the left. We're going to reduce the, oh man, this is difficult because the camera mirrors, man. So we're going to move we're going to reduce the x value by 1. We're going to move it to the left. And every time the button to the right is pressed, we're going to add to the x value by and it will move to the right. Very simple thing. Ha. I don't like the speed at which it's moving. It's kind of like compared to the ball, it's moving very slowly. So I'm going to add, I'm going to make it move faster. Again, I'm going to check my initial, what? Not focusing. I'm going to check my initial program to see what how fast it was moving in my initial program. I made some additional, ooh, wow, crazy stuff. So in my initial program, I went all the way to 5. This will make it go very fast, but it feels very responsive. But also another thing that feels, because it's working at 30 frames per second, you can see that's kind of like flimmery a little bit. It's because it's moving so fast, it's not, it doesn't seem as smooth motion, right? And that's something we're going to deal with today. We're going to make it, I don't even want to deal with collision right now. Collision is going to be difficult. First of all, I want to make sure that we're moving this and it moves in a cool way, that it feels just right. It's something that's very important about video games, something we call game feel. There's an entire book that I really recommend, also appreciate, called Game Feel. Check it out, it's great, called Game Feel. Some people also call it juiciness, which I think is a slightly different term, but it refers to the same thing, you know, how something feels like. Also something that I think Aaron Signal coined is kinesthetics. Again, like aesthetics is how something looks like. Kinesthetics is like the physical experience of interacting with it. Right. So this is okay, but it's very basic as far as kinesthetics, game feel, or juiciness goes. This is like, yeah, I don't know, man. But it's already a good start. Before we continue, before we fix this, before we make it cooler, 10 to 20% cooler, I wanted to also get this, because this is something that happens a lot of times, right? You take a variable that has a number in it, and you make this number bigger or smaller. In this case, by 5. And this is like a very long statement for something that should be like pretty simple, right? And you can make it actually simpler. You can go minus equals 5. And again, it's a weird statement. If your math teacher got you an aneurysm last time around, this time he's like, wow, he's flatlining and getting an aneurysm at the same time. It's like, what is even happening here? But it's like a coded message, basically. Like minus equals means take whatever what was in pad X and subtract 5 from this. And as you can imagine, the same goes for adding things. You go pad X plus equals. Does the same thing. I just rewrote it. It's I think it's a bit smaller, so it's a bit easier to parse it when you have like lots of lines of code. Another thing is that we also saved us some tokens. Just 1 token or something for this, because we didn't have to write the pad x second time around. But things like these add up. There's certain programs where you can even go like pad x plus plus. That just adds 1 to it. And by the way, this is a great joke. You know how there's a programming language called C++? Because it's 1 better than C. It's C++. Programmers are hilarious like this. This is where they go like, oh. Programmers, I swear, man. It is a little bit funny, I have to admit. Anyways, right. So we just rewrote this part, and you can see that, oh, now that we have this skill, we can apply it everywhere. We have to apply it everywhere. Actually, do we? Yeah, here, for example, see how we can say like this long statement? That's weird. We can go plus equals ball dx. And we go plus equals. Again, testing it. Huh, works the same. Just save us a bunch of stuff. Yes, thank you a lot, Beer Goat. That's exactly what I was getting at. And I'm being really slow here, so if you already know how programming works, you should just go ahead and just fast forward a little bit. I'm going like 1 step after another, because it's very easy to start like typing things, and people will go like, what, programming, I hate programming, table flip, this is not for me. And this is wrong. Programming is for everybody. You should be programming. Programming is a good thing, and this is the best way to do programming. All right. So again, we're moving the paddle back and forth now, but it's like this, it's like a robot. I mean, it's exactly like it was in original Pong. Although in original Pong, you had like a controller that was like a knob. You would turn a knob, and that would make it feel a little bit better. Like, I think the haptics of turning a knob makes it feel a bit smoother. It feels like you're actually engaging some kind of mechanism inside the computer. But when you're controlling with the buttons, when you change the controller from a knob to a button, it just feels like, it not really feels like you're engaging a mechanism. It feels like very robotic. So there's like a principle in animation, actually from Disney animation, called arcs. And it's there's like a couple of rules that Disney animators had to learn, like arcs and, you know, follow through and all that stuff. There's a great book about this, which I forgot the name of. I would have put it in the doobly-doo. Creating Life or something. It's a great book. You have to read it. Anyways, there's principle of animations, and one of them is arcs. So every real like natural movement, every movement that feels good, that feels natural, feels like physical, follows an arc. So you don't just like move like a robot, like I'm a robot. Actually, when you're moving like a robot, you're actually trying to avoid making arcs. But if you're moving naturally, you don't just move, you accelerate and then slow down at the end. Or at least, sometimes you maybe just, there's explosion and you move very fast and then you slow down. That's how it's, that's how an explosion works. Or when you fall, you start falling slowly, but then you start falling even faster. There's like different arcs that you're following. You're not just moving like linearly, like at the same speed, like the ball is moving right now, but there's like accelerations going on. And I really like to adding these kinds of accelerations to things I move, because then it feels like I'm pushing something around that has weight, that is maybe affected by friction. It just feels more natural. So we're going to add acceleration to our pad. There's different ways of doing this. I'm going to later on show you a very, very simple way to add animations, to add this kind of acceleration. But for the pad, we're going to go the full thing. So instead of just x and y, it's very easy, man. We're just going to go dx, dx and dy. This is how fast we're going to have to track the speed of the pad. Not just the position of the pad, but also the speed, because we're going to add acceleration to it, and we're going to take it away later on. Right, so here, instead of just setting the coordinates of the pad, You're gonna go pad underscore dx equals -1 or -5. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna quote this out in case we have to reset it, because this might go wrong. I'm not exactly sure if I'm doing this right, but yeah, usually you want to have track the speed of the pad. dy. Oops. And then here we're gonna change the position of the pad, because right now we're just changing the speed of the pad, but we're not actually changing the position of it. So pad pad x equals plus equals pad dx and pad y. Oops. Right. So now we change the speed of the pad, and then we're moving the pad by the speed. But there's a slight problem that we still don't have the acceleration that I was speaking of. Instead, what we have now is the pad will constantly move, because we never changed the speed back to 0. I'm going to show you what I mean. Oops. Oh, that's what oh no, I didn't want. Oh no, this is bad. Yeah, I miss. This is funny, by the way. Actually, I just want to move the pad in the x coordinate. I don't want to actually move it in the y coordinate. So we don't actually need the dy. Right, so we move it -5. You set the speed to -5 when it goes left, and to 5 when it goes right. Yeah, this is good. I mean, this is already fine because it's moving without us having to press a button. But then, you know, first of all, it disappears off the screen. And second of all, it doesn't stop. And I want it to stop. I want it to slow down. Right. So we kind of have to, so the other idea is that basically when it's moving, when you press a button, we're going to set the speed to a certain number. When we release the button, we want it to just slow down. It's not like exactly an arc. There's no acceleration when you press a button. We could add that as well if you wanted to. But the slow down is already enough to make it feel more physical. It already feels a bit better because it's moving without us having to press a button. The rule is always, the rule is always make things happen with a lot of things happen when the player does very little. So you press a tiny little button and a lot of things happen. That's really great. That always feels good in games. So you just tapping a button and it starts moving. It feels good. You pressing a button and it moves a little bit, and you have to keep pressing a button to keep moving it. That doesn't feel good. That's my experience. It's, you know, very basic game stuff, and it also, you know, it applies in like strategy games as well. Like if you hover over the button and the button does like an elaborate animation. That feels good. You want to press that button because it does elaborate things when you just hover with a mouse on it. When it already makes an elaborate animation while you're hovering it, just imagine the amazing things that will happen when you just click on it. You know, that's the kind of thinking. Anyways, right. There's different ways which we can check if no button was pressed. Something that we already used before is we can use a variable. So far we defined variables up here, outside of any functions. And these are so-called global variables, which means they're accessible within any function in this program. They're just always there, global. And that makes sense for the position of the pad, the position of the ball. But sometimes you need like little helper variables that are not like always there, but you know, just temporarily there, just to check something. And this is also great because we're working buttons, so now we can make funny named variables. We're going to make a variable called buttPress equals true. No, oh, actually false. So at the beginning of the update function, the buttPress variable is set to false. We don't know yet if any button was pressed. And then if a button was pressed, then we're going to go buttPress equals true. ButtPress equals true. And then we're going to do another test if buttPress, if not buttPress. So we're going to go like butpress equals false. We can go like this, but there's also another way to do this, which I like because it's cleaner. If not butpress. Oops. That's not good. If not, and bracket butpress then. So if the button was not pressed, then something happens, and then end. Here, we can slow down. We can slow down our thing, and we're just gonna go like pad dx equals pad dx divided by 2. Let's divide it by 2. So whatever speed it was going at, each frame it will go half the speed. That's the regular slowdown, the regular friction. And then we're gonna add it. Okay. Huh? See? See how it slows down a little bit? It's subtle. It's not like, whoa, crazy stuff. It's subtle, but it's just enough to make it feel like this is actually, you know, a living thing that exists. And you can now play around with the value where it's like, I want to make it feel floaty. I want to make it really nice and floaty. Then we can go like 1.2 on this. And see how floaty it now feels? And you can go even lower, like, you know, 1.01. Let's go really floaty. So now it feels like Super Mario on ice, you know. And then you can like experiment and pick exactly the kind of floatiness that you find appealing. Like this is kind of nice because it's like it's still moving a lot, but to be honest, I really wanted to make it really subtle. It's sometimes it's better to do less. Maybe maybe go 1.8. What's 1.5? Let's see. Not sure. Maybe 7. And it's a lot of experimentation. You know, it's like, okay, this feels right. Okay, this is snappy enough and still subtle enough. This is kind of like the sweet spot for me. And if you guys feel like, oh, you know, you're working this alone on your own, and it's like, I don't know, I feel like I need it more floaty or more snappy, then change to whatever you want. But yeah, this is why you need to develop things. Like, again, I have to do like another little speech here. I have a lot of situations where students will approach me and say like, oh, programming, yeah, I have my programmer for this. I will do all of the design on paper. I will write the design document, or I will draw images, you know, and then I will hand it over to my program, and my program will deal with all the stuff. This situation that we see here, is exactly the reason why this doesn't work. Because there's a lot of very, very important things about game making that are solved with code, that you have to type in numbers in, and that often you don't even have in your head when you're writing it, you know, the game down. Like if I had to write down the description of a Breakout, maybe I would forget that maybe they will want to add an acceleration to the pedal. Maybe it just doesn't feel right if there isn't an acceleration. So this is the reason why, even if you think that you don't, you know, you're not going to be the greatest programmer ever, and I'm not the greatest programmer ever, I'm not a programmer, I would consider myself a game designer. And yes, if I had like a bigger project, I would totally bring a programmer on board and it's like, dude, we have to figure this out because it's way too complicated for me. But still, you have to be able to understand code, to think in code. You have to be able to read the code of the game and fumble around with this. Even if you're not do the major work of doing things, of programming things, because of stuff like this, because you need to be able to touch things and change things. Just say like a game director, for example, not game director, what I'm saying, like a movie director has to be able to operate the camera. Even if there's a cameraman also on board who operates the camera, the director still has to understand the camera and has to understand what kind of how lenses work, and has to maybe sometimes even grab the camera and film themselves, which is shouldn't devalue the work of a good cameraman. A good cameraman is also worth a lot, and sometimes does the job of the director. You know, movies are messy, games are also messy. Anyways, what I want to say is, just as a director has to understand cameras, you have to understand programming, even if you're not going to be a programmer. All right. So with this little speech by side, we have our little pedal and it's moving right. So the next step here is going to be obviously that we want the ball to collide with the pad. That's a kind of like a big next step, and that's kind of like a complicated thing because we have to do collision detection, and it's going to be probably like a two-step thing. First, we want to do like a very rough collision detection with the pedal, but then we're going to have to deal with the complicated edge cases. And for this, it's going to be probably another episode because I'm going to tell you right away, spoilers, by the way, spoilers. I'm going to tell you right away, collision detection is like 90% sometimes, I feel, of game development. Let's say it's 40% of game development. Another 40% is interface programming. And the final 20% is the rest. It's there's a lot of effort that goes into collision detection. If you think about it, all like 3D games are basically about moving a cylinder into a square. That's actually what games are. You're moving a cylinder as the player that you're moving, and you're moving it the square, which is the area where you have to go to complete the level. Yeah, so collision detection next time around. Hope you join me next time around. See you. Bye bye, guys. Oh, save this. I'm a coder who's trying to learn how to make games, and Pico-8 is great for this. My art is terrible though, ha ha ha. That's also, I think, a thing that Pico-8 is great. The fact that you have such a limited color space, like just a couple of colors here, and you know, such rough pixels. Like pixel art is sometimes easier to. So good pixel art is difficult to do. I'm not going to devaluate pixel art. A really good artist can make wonders with pixel art, something that you cannot do as a game developer. I feel that if you're not really experienced with graphics, I think the most important things to get right early on, and the most difficult thing to get right early on, something that you don't have on your radar starting out, is to make things consistent. It's more important to make graphics consistent than to make them good in quality. So something that my students often do is they grab graphics from other games or like clip art from all across the web. And those are like, by themselves, those graphics that they're grabbing from Google search, Google image search, might be beautiful graphics. But when they're grabbing all the different graphics from different sources, they are different styles. They're very inconsistent, right? And that's what makes the game ugly, even though the individual graphics are kind of nice. So, you know, they will take like, you know, graphics sprite sheet from Mega Man, but then put like a 3D rendered background, you know, and it's like, that's ugly. Why is it so ugly? Well, because there's different styles that you're combining here. And so working with a restricted palette and a restricted resolution, like in Pico-8, is a really great way to kind of force you to have a consistent graphic style, because you cannot grab things from outside. It's difficult. And, you know, the color palette will always be the same and stuff like that. So if you're struggling as a game developer, if you're struggling with graphics, it's a good idea to restrict yourself, for example, to a color palette. So even if you're working in more complicated game development environments, just grab a color palette from like a color palette website and see like, I'm going to make graphics just in this one. And don't care about like making things beautiful. Just make sure that they're consistent, internally consistent with each other. And that's always, when a game looks consistent, it doesn't have to be beautiful. It kind of, the beauty comes from the consistency. It's like I liken this to, I always forget where, like when you laying out the dinner and you put the plate and the fork and knife on the sides, I always forget where the fork and knife goes. But somebody always once gave me like the hint, like it doesn't matter where the fork and knife goes, just make sure it's consistent on everyone. And it seems like it's intentional, you know. Oh, but today we're eating fish, so the fork goes on the other side, you know, whatever. But that's a good tip. Like make sure it's neat and tidy and consistent, and then everything will be fine. Oh, there's a question. What are the buttons on the top left of the screen? Oh, these ones. Right. So these change depending on which mode you are in. in the sprite mode, you can see more. So you click away the interface and you just draw more. So that's why you see now I draw not only this sprite, but also this sprite and this sprite. So this helps when you are, for example, drawing a start screen or something. Then you can, or you can zoom out here as well. There's like keyboard shortcuts, I guess spaces. Yeah, spaces. So it's like in Photoshop, you can start drawing things, and you can make like a nice start screen or something. And this is like adds all the interface, which is great for switching colors and stuff like that. But and great for like if you focus on one little square here. But difficult when you draw big images. And then in this mode, it's the same thing. You switch to, you see the entire map here. In this one, this is interesting because you have like the sound, the music editor, and the sound editor. But actually, the sound editor is also a music editor, or at least a similar interface here. So these are like these visual things where I was drawing things, right? I hope I didn't. I saved, right? And then, but if a drawing is not your thing, then you can tweak the individual values of the individual tones here. That's kind of nice. So Timmy2525 says open source Pico-8 like software Lico12. Yes, there is open source versions. Lico12 is a good example. I also saw like a port of Pico-8 on Lua Love called Pico-Love. Maybe I'm going to actually put it on the comment sections. I haven't tried Lico12, so I'm not familiar with this. Lico12 has high resolution, so the screen's wider, which I liked. And Lua Love is has no restriction in space, so there's actually good stuff there. Hey Christian, what do you think of Game Maker Studio? I like it. I had some good results with this. Like I haven't developed a lot of things myself in this. But a lot of my students are using Game Maker Studio. It's kind of nice that you can start like with point and click and then graduate into more complex stuff. A lot of big indie developers are working with Game Maker Studio, like Flambert is a very well-known one. But I'm a bit suspicious of game environments where you start off with clicking. Even though it seems like there's the barrier of entry is not that high, because they are quite restricted, and it's kind of good to push the students, if you're learning, into the cold water. And it's like you have to program, so they learn it immediately. So then later on they maybe can okay, I don't have to mess around with the code. I can just also click. But if something goes wrong, I know how to fix it. So DD Damien 999 says Pico-8 is just a player, not the dev environment. Huh. I didn't know. I thought it was also the dev environment. That's weird, but that's okay. I haven't tried myself. I just saw that Love is a really cool environment to graduate into when you're done with Pico-8. When you feel like, okay, Pico-8 is way too restrictive. I want to make real games with serious resolution, with cool graphic assets and stuff like that. Then Love is a good way to use the same language, Lua, in a more mature, bigger environment.